You're listening to the Kitchen Confession Podcast with Chef Mary Mammoliti.
It's not just fuel. It's not just something you order off an app. It's not something that is measured by how much money you're willing to spend on it. It's something that you engage in with other people together, and the sum is greater than the parts. Because we live in a time where I think there's this unprecedented enthusiasm in food. Growing up, nobody took pictures of their lunch, right? Like, people care about food a lot, but I want to see that care reflected in their participation in it, their engagement in it, and their, it's a source of interest and meaning and motivation.
That's Len Senater, the founder of the Depaneur. It's a unique venue space that hosts food events in the GTA. The Depp, as it's known to local Torontonians, is a quaint, restaurant-style venue space where creators and consumers can connect and explore new foods. The Depp hosts cooking classes, guest speakers, drop-in dinners, private events, the supper club, and in 2016, Len created the Newcomer Kitchen, where Syrian newcomer women prepare traditional foods for pickup or delivery. Well, I think it's time to get to Len. He can explain this a lot and talk all things the Depaneur much better than I can. Welcome, Len. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's great. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you. What sparked your passion for food?
Well, I feel like I've always kind of gone through life stomach first. It's always been something that I've found incredibly interesting. Fascinated when I've traveled. It's always been the food that really stuck out. I think a lot of the really most meaningful experiences I've had are connected to food in one way or another.
What's the first recipe you can remember trying?
I guess one of my earliest food memories would be making scrambled eggs with a cheese slice, sort of torn up and mixed into the scrambled eggs, and that was my little sort of culinary discovery that you could make this sort of, gooey cheese omelet thing. I think I maybe wanted to add some garnish, so I sprinkled whatever green thing was in the spice rack. I don't know that I made much of a distinction between parsley or dill or oregano at that time, but would put something on it. And I actually remember cooking that and being proud of having come up with this particular dish. That was, I'd probably still eat it too. If I had access to cheese slices, if I found some in my fridge, I'd probably still like it. Yeah.
So true. How did you get started in the kitchen?
I was looking for a transition out of some of the work I was doing before. I had this notion that I wanted to do something involving food, but the idea of frantically cooking the same thing every day for a bunch of people I never meet didn't feel like the way I wanted to do it. And so, I was thinking about this, and I was also becoming fascinated by the phenomenon of pop-up dining, which seemed to be picking up steam in many different cities around the world. But it really didn't seem to be happening much in Toronto, and I was trying to figure out why that was. And I got the sense that the cost of setting up the infrastructure to do a one-off event was so prohibitive that very few people had enough money to set it all up, and then the resulting events had to be really expensive, and then so only people with lots of money could go to them, and it was really limited in its scope. And so I had the idea of creating a venue that was fully dedicated to hosting pop-up events, and that had everything you needed, so you didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And this would allow us to kind of lower the barrier to entry and make it a lot easier for a much greater diversity of people to come in and participate as cooks, and then the resulting events could be much cheaper, and we could have a much greater and interesting diversity of people who could participate as diners. And that was the idea that I kind of was at the heart of the Depp, and I've been running with for the last 8 years or so.
So if you had to describe your cooking style, what would that be?
I don't think I have a very distinct personal style. I am very much an improvisational and opportunist cook. I basically cook with whatever's there. And then draw on, the different places that I've traveled and the different foods that I've eaten for the kind of things that interest me and what I've learned about cooking and cuisine and the underlying mechanics of flavor from all the different events that I've hosted and the different life experiences that I have. So I'm not typically one who follows a lot of recipes. I mean, I like to read cookbooks because I'm interested in the food and the history and the culture and the thoughts behind it, but I rarely follow recipes when cooking. I certainly like home cooking better than fine dining, which is a big part of the Depaneur. I can only get to so many people's homes, so I kind of tricked them and had them all come to me instead.
That's brilliant. Where does your inspiration for cooking come from?
It's a reflection of my interest in culture, my interest in travel. I love discovering and learning about the ingredients. I love understanding how cuisines sort of have come to be. Like, why do those flavors exist in that particular place? What's its connection to the terroir, to the ingredients, to the culture, to the history? And those little lessons, you kind of like give you a little bit of the logic behind particular cuisines, and then you can carry that in when you are trying to improvise in a particular direction.
Do you ever find yourself combining two different types of cuisines? I do it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inevitably combining essentially Canadian, cuisine, be it what it is, with whatever it is that I might be cooking. I mean, Canada, being such a young country and having so little, if any, of its own distinct culinary history or tradition, has a lot of freedom to kind of mix anything with anything. One of the things I've observed is in a lot of other places in the world, like, there are very, very specific ways that things have to be made. I mean, if you come from this particular town, it's this particular shape of pasta with this particular kind of sauce, or you put you use this spice, but not that spice. And that's the way it's done, and it's done for a reason, and that's what it means to come from that particular place. Here, we have a very cavalier attitude towards things. Oh, we don't have that vegetable. It's okay. We'll just substitute this vegetable. We don't have this shaped pasta. No problem. We'll just use whatever we have on the shelf. And we're not closely tied to those things. They don't mean a lot to us. We're happy to substitute anything for anything. But you don't see that in places that have really deeply rooted culinary traditions.
I like to play a couple of games. Are you up for it?
Sure.
The first one's called This or That.
The choice is yours. You can get with this or you can get with that.
Pizza or pasta?
It is a tough one. And it depends so much, because there's great pizza and there's, terrible pasta, and there's terrible pizza and fabulous pasta. So it does depend. But I would just say, as a general, pasta being so fabulously versatile and noodles being appearing in so many different cultures, I wouldn't want to give up my noodles. I'm a big fan.
Pancakes or waffles?
I eat a lot, probably more pancakes than I eat waffles, but I think I kind of like a great waffle is transcendent. Like, it's a really special, amazing thing. Doesn't happen that often, but I'll take a great waffle pretty much over a lot of things.
I've yet to find that great waffle.
Yeah. They're rare, but they're pretty good. Like a lot of butter.
It's like involved. A unicorn. It's there somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Corn or peas?
I think corn, especially like summer sweet corn. That's another pretty delicious thing that you can't miss out.
Carnivore or veggie? I
like meat. I really do. I just don't necessarily feel like you got to eat a whole lot of it. Every once in a while, there'll be like, whether it be barbecue or something like, but, as a general rule, I'm guessing maybe around 80% vegetarian at this point.
This was really important. Toothpaste, squeezed from the middle or the bottom?
I'll be honest. I probably squeeze from the middle and then retroactively go from the bottom and sort of make up for it.
Okay, you've redeemed yourself. Earlier we mentioned your restaurant and venue space, the Depaneur. I'm curious to know, where did the name come from?
Well, a Depaneur is what you call a corner store anywhere in French Canada. So I was born in Montreal. I grew up here in Toronto, but I moved back and lived in Montreal for more than 10 years. And it was very, it was a lot that I really love and miss about the kind of spontaneous joie de vivre that animated Montreal in my 20s, and, the experiences that I had there. So, I've always, the Depp is a little bit my nostalgic love letter to things that I miss about Montreal. So yeah, the local corner stores, all the local corner stores in Montreal are called Depaneur, the Depp. It's, you would be running out to the Depp. And so the venue that I have on the corner of Rushland Park Crescent and College used to be a corner store. It was a corner store, pretty terrible one, sort of an inconvenience store at the time. When I saw the sign in the window that they were selling, and it had bars on the windows and chains on the doors and single cigarettes and expired Clamato, and it was not a nice place. And so, but that was the rent was really cheap, and so that became the place where I was going to like do this sort of community and food experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And being now I was a Montrealer, an ex-Montrealer with a corner store. So calling it the Depaneur seemed kind of like an obvious thing, but I also really liked the original meaning of the word. So in French, if you are, for example, if you're driving down the street and your car breaks down, you might say, je suis en peine, meaning I'm stuck, I'm in trouble, I'm in a jam, I'm in a difficult situation. So the Depaneur is someone who gets you unstuck or out of trouble. It's like a problem solver or a troubleshooter who helps you when you're in a tight spot. And so I guess, like in France, a Depaneur would still be like roadside assistance or a tow truck driver or mechanic. But in Quebec, I guess it was like, oh, it's 10:30. I really need beer and cigarettes. And May West, like, who's going to get me out of this crisis? Oh, the Depaneur saved the day. So they became, the person who helps you out. And so, yeah, I was a Montrealer with a corner store, but I also believed that felt like food in Toronto was a little bit en peine, and maybe I could dépanner a little bit.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so fitting for what you do. I mean, like I mentioned, you have cooking classes, table talks. Could we talk a little bit about some of the things that you offer at the Depaneur?
Sure. So, I mean, essentially, we're a venue that curates and hosts many, many different kinds of pop-up food events, probably on the order of about 300 different events a year. We invite guest cooks, both amateur and professional, to do many different kinds of things. The tagline is, it's a place where interesting food things happen. And that's what we try to do. So we invite guest cooks to do different formats. So we do hands-on cooking classes and workshops where a cook will come in and share their knowledge and passion and expertise in a particular area. We do drop-in dinners on Thursdays. The drop-in dinners are kind of like an open mic night for culinary talent. So anybody who loves to cook, professional or amateur, they can sign up, come in, make their favorite food, and then we open the doors from 6 till 9. Anyone can drop in and get a plate of whatever we happen to be making that day, for eat in, for takeout. It's pretty casual.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the weekends, we host our supper club. Supper club is a little more formal. We invite the chef or the cook to do a multi-course dinner. We push out all of our tables, and everybody eats together in one big BYOB family style dinner party where things are on platters and people share the food and everyone eats together. We've also been home to many great brunch residencies. So we invite someone to come in and develop a brunch concept and then run with it for a year or two. So we have a great one on the go right now, sort of an Eastern Mediterranean Levantine-inspired brunch run by 2 very talented young women. And then we also rent out the venue for people who need a place to host their own food events, whether it's like a birthday party or an office gathering or whatever. There's not a lot of places that include the full kitchen. So you can cook yourself, or you can cook together with your friends, or you can work with a chef or caterer of your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm happy to connect them with any of the hundreds of cooks that have, done stuff at the Depp before, and put them together so that they can cater whatever type of food they might be after. So we do all of these different kinds of things that try to connect people with food in a very open and transparent way. We host a monthly table talk. It's sort of an informal culinary salon. We invite a guest speaker to come and talk on some subject in the world of food that's exciting to them. And that's the time when I cook. So I'll cook once a month. I make a meal that's inspired by the subject of the talk. And so I'll make something each month that's, completely different, inspired by whatever the person happens to be talking about. And then I also try to do a vegan and gluten-free version of whatever it is that I decide to make. So I keep myself challenged, but it can be really diverse. Like it's been from medieval Spain to, Elizabethan England to like dystopian futures.
Right.
We really, it's always a new topic and a new challenge. And that's what kind of keeps it fun and interesting for me.
So if someone like myself, I wanted to host pop-up dinner, what would I have to do? What's required of me?
You basically say, hey, I'd like to come and cook at the Depp. I'd be like, okay, well, let's look at what date is available in the calendar. It's very self-selecting. Like I don't force people to audition or anything. It's basically like, if you're a really terrible cook, this would be the last thing in the world you'd want to do. This
Exactly.
is like your worst anxiety nightmare. This is basically if you're the kind of person who's interested and enthusiastic and wants to cook for a small crowd, then I'm, kind of come in and let you do what you do. You would have essentially 2 options. You could come and be a cook for one of the Depaneur's events, one of our drop-ins or one of our supper clubs, in which case we would sell the tickets or promote the event or host the event, and you would be the featured cook. Or you would simply rent the venue to have a place where you could host a food event of your own. And you could then, it would be private for you, and you could invite whoever you wanted. So those options would be available to you. It's also an entrepreneurial opportunity. So like if you're coming to cook at one of our supper clubs, I put it online, I sell the tickets, I promote it, and then I actually pay the cook $25 per person for which they can then divide between their pocket and their ingredients however they want. So it's like at the end of a Saturday night, it's $600 plus half the tips that goes to the chef. So a lot of people, get to, so it makes it a good little, it's like having a really nice big dinner party, except all your ingredients are paid for and you have some beer money at the end of the night too.
And what the Depaneur supplies is the kitchen, the space. Do we have to bring cooking utensils or anything? Or that's all there? It's all
totally
supplied.
We pretty, unless you need something like very specific or esoteric, we pretty much have everything you need to host a food event up to maybe about 30 people. So you just need to bring your ingredients.
Oh, that's great. And especially if you enjoy cooking for large groups and it's you just love cooking. It's a great way to showcase that.
Yeah, it's a mix. So we have people who are just like enthusiastic cooks and foodies who love it, but don't really have any interest in working in the industry, but have skills We have fledgling professionals, like people just out of school or who are studying, who have skills and ambition and want some practice and some exposure, want to get out there and, try some things out, challenge themselves. And then we also have some like really established, like veteran professional chefs who come in sometimes because they don't get to cook the food they really love in their job. Like, you work at a fancy French restaurant, but you really want to be making, Sichuan, like you're kind of out of luck. So they get total creative freedom to come and do the food that's interesting to them. And I believe if it's fun and interesting for the chef, then it's going to be more fun and interesting for the diners too.
Mm-hmm. Or make a dish like with tripe.
Sure. We've done all kinds of, we did a dinner that was like a recreation of the last meal served on the Titanic, or we did a meal that was
that's cool.
Only had black and white ingredients and a black and white dress code. Or we did one that was like a Scottish Haitian fusion dinner called Voodoo Haggis. You can't maybe build a restaurant on that, but for one night, you can have a lot of fun and be creative, and the stakes are low, so you can take risks that you wouldn't necessarily be able to take in the regular sort of commercial food space.
I'm Mary Mamalidi, and you're listening to the Kitchen Confession podcast. Today I'm talking with Len Senater of the Depaneur, whom I call an entrepreneurial inspiration. The Depaneur is home to a really interesting outreach program called the Newcomer Kitchen, and I'd love to hear a lot more about this.
Okay. Well, so at the heart of all the different things that the Depaneur does was this idea that I thought it was possible to have more interesting, more memorable, more meaningful food experiences, and that they didn't have to be fancy to be great. And that idea led me to this peculiar kind of restaurant that invites total strangers to do all the cooking. And so with keeping that in mind, when we first heard of the Syrian refugee families arriving in Toronto, many of them were stuck in hotels for months where they had no kitchens, no way to prepare any food for themselves or their families. So it wasn't that much of a stretch for the Depp to just, extend the invitation to use our kitchen, make some familiar food, share a meal, bring some leftovers home for your friends. And that's all it was. And so, and that first group of ladies, they came down, they had fun, they made all this fabulous food. So we did it again. And we did it again after that. And from that small gesture of hospitality has emerged this remarkable project. Once they were relocated into their own homes, the focus sort of shifted and started to, work on creating social and economic opportunities for these talented women who don't necessarily have access to many other kinds of opportunities like this, that are a way to participate, to do what they're really good at, to showcase their skills, to make a little bit of money on their own, to be validated and seen and heard, and to participate in authoring a really positive narrative about their role in their new home. And so it's grown to now include over 80 Syrian families in the GTA. Every Wednesday, a group of 6 or 7 ladies will come to the Depaneur, and they prepare 50 meals of traditional Syrian home cooking. We sell those meals on our website for pickup, and Foodora sponsors free delivery in the neighborhood and flat rate delivery across the city. And all the revenue that's generated pays for the ingredients and the packaging and the costs and so on and so forth. And then it's distributed among the ladies who cook. This project, along with some special event catering that we've been trying to develop alongside with some of the women, has combined put about $150,000 directly into the pockets of the families since it began, which is pretty great.
That's wonderful.
But I really believe that this idea, and I should also point out that this wasn't done alone. Like I had a co-founder, Kara Benjamin Pace, who's instrumental in putting this whole idea together. There was a young Syrian family, a young Syrian couple, Haf al-Akbani and Ismail Abu Fakr, who were themselves living in the hotels, and they acted as our liaison coordinators. And there was a large community of supporters who all came together and supported the sort of birth and creation of this project. And it's with their incredible hard work and effort that we've been able to take the project this far. So now we've incorporated the Newcomer Kitchen as a separate nonprofit organization. And the goal is to secure funding so that we can package up this idea and put it out in the world so that it could work with any newcomer community in any kitchen that's willing to open its doors in any city in the world. So all the menus are posted in advance. There's pictures and menus and descriptions. And where possible, I'll dig in and figure out background on the particular dish, where it comes from, whose recipe it is, a bit of a history, kind of put a little context for that particular dish. And it's fabulous. I mean, the Syrian food is absolutely fabulous. I mean, it's ironic because although we have a lot of Middle Eastern restaurants in Toronto, we don't have, until extremely recently, any restaurants specializing on the regional cuisine of Syria, which is it's sort of like saying, oh, well, we should go to that European restaurant. I hear they have really good food. It's incredibly diverse culture. It's incredibly diverse cuisine. It's incredibly local and regional and rooted in the terroirs of the different parts of the country. And in the Middle East, in the Levant, the Eastern Middle East, Syria in general, and Aleppo and Damascus in particular, are really kind of the equivalent to what sort of France, Paris, and Lyon might be in Europe. Like, it's widely considered to be the sort of pinnacle of that historical culinary tradition.
It sounds wonderful. Now, I can say I've never had a traditional Syrian meal. Can you describe what that would look like?
Well, I mean, you probably have, in the sense that the Levantine cuisine is the ones that you would typically be familiar with. So you have your tabbouleh salad and your hummus and your falafels and your kebabs and that kind of stuff. But that's shared throughout the entire region and very sort of commonplace. And each place has their own variation on doing it. So like, you've had a falafel, but a Syrian falafel has a slightly different shape. It has a hole in the middle, and it's sprinkled with sesame seeds on one side and has its own unique, combination of spices.
Really?
Yeah. And so another thing is that there's a really robust historical restaurant tradition in Syria, very sophisticated, but it's almost entirely run by men. And so there's a big distance between the sort of restaurant or the fine dining world and the home cooking, which is entirely done by women. And it's like, and you see that in a lot of restaurant cuisines. I mean, what you eat in a Japanese restaurant is not what you would eat in a Japanese home, for the most part. So, one of the things that is exciting to me about a Newcomer Kitchen is it really focuses on the Syrian home cooking, which is often different than what you might find in the restaurant scene there or here, because it's made by different people for different reasons and with different priorities. And so that's really exciting. There are some dishes that would be familiar, like the ones I mentioned, fattoush, or which is like a salad with crispy pita croutons, or tabbouleh, which would be a parsley and bulgur salad, or hummus. Those are dishes that you might be. But they also have things that I've never seen or tried before getting into this project, and some of them are even, interestingly, like hyper local. So like, we had one lady came in, she explained that she wanted to make this particular dish, al ragaga. She said, oh, it's very famous, and we always make it when there's a big party or a wedding, and it's the most famous thing in my family, and everybody used to make. And then there was another lady who's like, I live 200 kilometers away, I've never even heard of this dish. Right.
Really?
So, yeah, and so we had a fun conversation there. She's like, I like coming to the Newcomer Kitchen because I get to learn recipes Syrian recipes that I don't know. I feel like I get to learn more about being Syrian.
Actually, you know what? That is true, because when I think of when I went to Italy, different towns had different meals or prepared the same meal, but differently.
Well, I mean, and not only that, they'll call the same ingredient two different names, or they'll have the same name for two different ingredients. So there's actually a lot of complexity. And then let's not even get into the fact that every single lady has the only right way to make every single dish. So, this is fun and interesting, but it's also there's a certain amount of diplomacy that's involved. It takes challenge. It's more time consuming to figure out. They also don't use recipes. Nobody's using a recipe. So you have to figure out what everything is. They're like, oh, we want to make, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, sounds great. Let's make it. What do you need? They're like, we need the bulgur. I'm like, okay, great. What kind of bulgur do you want? They're like, the soft one. I'm like,
that's hilarious. Yeah.
Okay. Which one's the soft one? I'm like, the Turkish kind. I'm like, okay, I still don't. How much do you need? A bag.
Yeah.
All right. And then you multiply that by every ingredient and and it becomes, it's a whole different set of challenges than you might find in a restaurant kitchen. So, but the result is remarkable food.
Yeah. Well, they know the recipe so well, I'm guessing, that they don't even need measuring cups. It's just they eyeball it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the extent is astonishing. Like you'll say, oh, we have a big event. We need to make 300 of these, of whatever it is. And, one of the older ladies will just pick up a giant bag of flour, pour it into a bus pan, and start cooking. And you're like, okay, how much is that? She's like, enough.
Yeah.
And, and damn it, if it isn't exactly like when they're done, we've made 303 of exactly those things. But no one has any idea how much, which makes it incredibly hard to shop for or cost or, provision in a commercial setting. Right. But, as a testament to their incredible skill, it's been a huge challenge for us because it isn't a fixed thing. Right. It varies a lot. And I mean, I guess the format of the Depp and the format of the kitchen gives us a certain amount of freedom that it can be a little different each week, depending on which lady is leading the recipe, and that we're not held to the standard of a restaurant that wants to have that exactly consistent result every single time. So, it works well with what we're trying to do.
Well, I like to ask all my guests if they have a recipe that you'd like to share.
Well, there's lots of recipes that come to mind. I mean, rather than a specific recipe, I could give you some things that I've learned from the Newcomer Kitchen that you might be able to apply in your own kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing is some really great and versatile ingredients are pomegranate molasses.
Gosh, that sounds good.
Yeah, so it's basically pomegranate juice that's boiled down into a thick, tart, sweet syrup, right? It's somewhere, to my mind, it would be like the balsamic vinegar of the Middle East, right? It's a popular ingredient. It's used in a lot of salad dressings and as a condiment, and versatile. It's a nice thing to have, nice thing to add. Your pantry lasts forever. Sumac is another ingredient. It's made from the same sumac berries that grow here in Canada, but it's ground up into a sort of dark red powder and adds a wonderful bright lemony tang to whatever you sprinkle it on.
Now, I've just been introduced to sumac, and the question that I have is, do you use it while you're cooking or is it after as a seasoning?
I think it can be both.
Okay.
I think you can they'll do certain dishes, like they'll do like a kibe sumakia, which means like it's a kibe. You've had, it's a little sort of football shaped bulgur wheat sort of fried dumpling stuffed with. Yeah. So they'll make, apparently, like in Damascus, there's about 25 or 30 types of kibbeh just in one city. Right. So just because you have kibbehs to say, I've had pasta. No, it's like a lot more complicated. Right. So one of the popular types of kibbehs, it would be kibbeh that's then cooked in a sumac sauce. So the sauce is infused with sumac and has eggplant and chunks of lamb and stuff, and then the kibbeh in it. So it's used, as the basis of these sort of sour sauces, but it's also used, like, for example, sprinkled on salads to give them a lemony tang. And it also makes a very attractive garnish on anything that could use a tang. So, like, if you have a hummus or a baba ganoush and you want to garnish it, because of the beautiful red color, It's a nice thing you can sprinkle in. It makes it a bit lemony.
Mm-hmm.
Most people might be familiar with baba ganoush, right, as it being an eggplant and tahini dip, right? And there's lots of variations. The Syrian version of it is probably the best one I've ever had. So they tend to, they use, again, like a very smoky eggplant as the base. You can roast your eggplants until the skin is black and then peel them in to get that smokiness in them. A little secret, you can actually buy what they call grilled eggplants as a Turkish product in a can, and they're very smoky and very delicious. And it turns baba ganoush from a kind of a bit of a production to make into like something you can put together in a few minutes.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
In a Middle Eastern store, if you find a can of grilled eggplant that's unseasoned, it's a great starting point for this. They would use typically a combination of tahini and yogurt to give it richness but lightness and a bit of tang.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's olive oil and garlic, and then it's garnished with pomegranate molasses, walnuts that have been sort of fried in butter, pomegranate seeds, and parsley. And the combination of the sweet and the sour and the tangy and the nutty and the smoky and the garlicky is just so much more than the sum of its parts. It's beautiful to look at, incredibly delicious to eat, and if you buy it in a can, really fast to put together.
Oh my gosh, this sounds unbelievable. All right, we're going to do a rapid fire. What is your junk food kryptonite?
Probably Coca-Cola.
Favorite ingredient to cook with?
There's not a lot of things that can't be improved by putting a fried egg on it.
Do you have a favorite chef, and who is it?
Tough to say. I think it might be Greg Couillard. That man is just a real genius. He probably single-handedly did more to transform Toronto's culinary scene in the 80s than any other person. And I think the whole really dynamic and international culinary scene of Toronto owes him a huge debt. And I've had the honor and privilege of having him at the Depaneur over the last couple of years, and every single time it's an education.
Oh, nice. Ingredient you're most afraid of?
You know what? I don't, again, because I don't cook a lot of meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm intimidated by recipes that involve like cooking a great big piece of meat. So if you gave me like $150 prime rib, thing, like I would be like, I don't think I'm the person to be cooking this. So
Fair enough. Name 5 foods you always keep in your fridge at all times.
it's not going to be that exciting, but there'll be like eggs, cheese, milk, bread. And I actually don't keep that I'll keep it in the freezer, but and juice. I guess those would be like, if I've got that, I'm like, I can have my good breakfast and figure the rest out.
You're good to go.
Yeah, but there's also like, it's like a whole condiment graveyard in there. So like there's, condiments come from all over the world to die in the corner of my fridge. So yeah.
And last one. Justin Timberlake brought sexy back. What would you bring back?
Ooh, you did? Uh-oh. I don't know. I think like a direct participation in food. It's not just fuel. It's not just something you order off an app. It's not something that is measured by how much money you're willing to spend on it. It's something that you engage in, yourself and with other people together, and the sum is greater than the parts.
Oh,
And
I like that.
It's not just what's on your plate. It's not just what goes in your mouth. And I'd like to see because we live in a time where I think there's this unprecedented enthusiasm in food. I mean, growing up, nobody took pictures of their lunch, right? Like people care about food a lot, but I want to see it, that care reflected in their participation in it, their engagement in it, and their, as a source of interest and meaning and motivation for them. I want it to be more participatory and less commodified.
And the last question I like to ask all my guests is, can you share a kitchen confession with me?
Well, geez. Well, I guess I'm just trying to think of. Well, I'll tell you one story that comes to mind was like that. We rent out for a lot of private events, and we had rented out for one, and sometimes and I kind of lose track on the details of who's coming for which day on what. It gets like kind of a blur. And these people are so we had this event coming up. And they start, setting up the room and they're decorating it really nicely. I'm like, oh, this is really nice. And then I realized, oh yeah, there was going to be was some sort of wedding related thing. I thought they were going to have like a rehearsal dinner where the family was kind of getting together. And then they're decorating. And then I'm realizing, wait a minute. oh no, they're actually going to get married
Oh.
at the Depp. They're actually having the wedding here. I'm like, damn, I should have worn a nicer t-shirt. So that was a little, but they were, you know, it all went swimmingly. It was a very lovely event, but it was, you know, one of those little things where, again, I could probably have been a little better prepared.
Oh, it happens. It happens to everyone. If our listeners want to reach out for more info from you, to find out how they can get involved, anything, what can they do?
Well, if you're interested in the Depaneur and a Newcomer Kitchen, all the information is on the website. So everything's at thedepaneur.ca. The Newcomer Kitchen has its own area at newcomerkitchen.ca if you want to be involved in that specifically. They both have email newsletters that we send out to people up to date on all the new events that are sort of being posted on a weekly basis. And it's all on Facebook as well. So we have active pages and communities for both the Depaneur and Newcomer Kitchen online, and we're on Instagram and Twitter as well. So there's lots of ways to reach out and follow. If you were interested, and ultimately the best way to support either or the projects is simply by participating, by attending. So if you want to come to the Depp and have dinner, take a class, or join us for dinner, you know, come by. And if you're interested in the Newcomer Kitchen and supporting the opportunity, then, you know, come in and buy one of the meals, either have it delivered or come by and pick it up.
Thank you so much. I've had such a good time and learned so much talking with you.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been a really fun chat.
It's that time. We've reached the end of another show. Be sure to visit kitchenconfession.com for more recipes and foodie finds. I'd like to thank producer and editor Matt Agnew, and I'm Mary Mamalidi. See you at the next episode.